Domo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Manga Lounge, Jujutsu Kaisen Edition, Chapter 121, the Shibuya Incident, Part 39. Man, what is that, about nine months worth of chapters or so? Yeah, roughly, right? Yeah, roughly about nine months worth. But yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I know as people who read it week in, week out, that might seem like, wow, that's a really long time. Like, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, when when the volumes come out and things like that, it's really not that much, right? Especially compared to some Shonen Jump manga where, you know, arcs can go on for a dozen books more. This would roughly be Shibuya Incident, probably about 5-6 volumes worth, which, I mean, yeah, I guess in Jujutsu Kaisen standards for a new one, it's pretty long, but fun nonetheless. Last week was quite the downer, so this week they're kind of bringing the hype, and I think Akutami Sensei kind of recognizes the pacing a little bit, right? Certainly when it comes to manga, you have to be careful, you know, especially with kind of a darker tone manga like Jujutsu Kaisen. You have to be careful not to bring too much bad news all the time, right? Week in, week out. Lately, it's been a very downhill kind of for the good guys, so to speak, anyways, right? So there definitely is something as fatigue as a reader. So you know, if you have to kind of have that good ebb and flow, right? Good stuff with bad stuff. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit of a, I wouldn't say a chore, because it's always, you know, a great manga. But yeah, I like this week being a little bit more kind of again, focus on Yuji a little bit, show off his skills a little bit, and kind of get us excited again, right? But yeah, this week I am joined by Mei Volume 12. Good looking cover, obviously. And volumes, the English volume 5 is out already, and English volume 6 should be out soon. So if you would like to support, I have the links in the description. Thank you very much if you choose to spread that positive juju. Also, if you choose to hit that like or share a comment, thank you very much to all of those that do. But hey, let's get into it. Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 121, Shibuya Incident Part 39. Here we go. All right, so this week, you know, we leave off right after the thing with Nanami. Yes, but you know, it's you never know if it'll kind of switch to somewhere else in Shibuya right now. But as of right now in Shibuya, I am kind of working on a timeline in my head and kind of thinking about. But I think Mei and Fate Geto should be fighting, if not, how, depending on how long that fight lasts, might be done already, I don't know. But pretty much right now what's going on is right here between Mahito and Itadori. We don't know where Panda and Kusakabe are. We don't know what's going on with Toge, Maki, Naobito. We don't know where Kugisaki is either, right? So we'll see, though. We'll see. But Mahito immediately coming out with his transfigured humans, flicks a little remember, this is always something that that when Itadori first saw, really kind of caught him off guard and really messed with him. But he seems to be a lot more focused now, and he's kind of gotten over that hump, right? Yeah, then we move on, page 2. We see it kind of transfigured, grows big. Then we see Mahito using this thing called soul multiplicity, right? We saw it briefly when he used it against Gojo. When he was fighting alongside Choso, he used soul multiplicity, and Choso was using his convergence, right, with the blood manipulation. And then we also saw body repel, but at the time we didn't know what it was. We heard him say soul multiplicity, body repel, but we had no idea what it actually was. And here we do get a little bit of explanation on page 4. So for soul multiplicity, it's quite simple, technique that merges 2 or more souls. So, you know, Mahito, it certainly sounds like something that Mahito is only able to do. So he takes the two kind of transfigured humans and binds them together. And this is where it gets interesting with body repel. So the explanation is soul multiplicity creates a reaction due to the rejection of fusion. So the idea being that when you forcibly combine these souls, there is kind of I know it's not the right word, but like a chemical reaction, like a biological rejection. Like it shouldn't be, it's unnatural, right? But this creates this kind of reaction. And then it sounds like Mahito is able to kind of manipulate it further, and it creates this like very powerful output of energy, and he's able to direct that at an opponent. So very, very interesting, kind of weird, right? Like, well, what does that really mean? But that's what the description that Akutami Sensei certainly gave. And certainly, again, something that sounds like only Mahito would really be able to do because of his idol transfiguration, right? So it seems to be kind of a derivative of that, a usage of it. Because remember, as explained on the following pages, you know, as we go on to page 5 and page 6, we see Mahito popping out, boo, you know, always messing with his opponents. But then so he gets a good shot in on Itadori. In the last chapter, he talked about how he can't use idol transfiguration directly on Yuji, right? Because we saw what happened before. Obviously, Sukuna sleeping inside Itadori, and he does not want to be disturbed. You know, obviously Yuji very disturbed by the way that Mahito just kind of plays with. I don't think. I know it's a little naive the way that Yuji talks sometimes, but certainly very characteristic of kind of a Shonen Jump protagonist, right? Like, how can you do that? And so it is kind of in line with SJ. But I like how I like how realistic kind of Mahito is. Like, well, what do you want me to do? I'm a cursed spirit, you know, like I'm a cursed spirit's gonna be a cursed spirit. You want me to look sad the next time I do it? But then he goes on and says this kind of weird thing as we all recognize this little transfigured human here on the bottom of page 9 as Junpei, whether it's actually Junpei or I think he's just kind of manipulating, right, to make it look like Junpei. It's not actually Junpei. He says, here's a simple answer since you're such a simple guy. You are me. Now, obviously, this, when you kind of first see that, you're like, what does that mean? It's hard to tell at this moment. I certainly saw this and was like, whether it's supposed to mean something very like, I don't think it's supposed to mean anything literal, right? I think it's supposed to be something a little bit more philosophical. Obviously, we do know that Mahito is kind of a form. He's derived from just human beings' general kind of negative energy, negative emotions like sadness, jealousy, anger, rage, all that kind. Anger and rage are the same thing, but you know what I mean. So he is an actual form of that. So how that kind of connects to Itadori, I don't know. Again, this is something that, you know, a little kind of a riddle that perhaps as the story goes on, we'll kind of get a little bit more about, because, you know, he kind of plays it off on the next frame here, kind of like, I'm just kidding, I'm just a cursed spirit, you know, spouting nonsense. But, you know, on page 11, he says, until you accept that fact, there's no way you'll ever beat me. Which, again, I think it's supposed to perhaps be something a little bit more philosophical, but I don't want to state something as fact if I don't actually know what the answer is. So but, you know, Yuji kind of getting tired, and this certainly on page 12, this is what I absolutely love, because I talked about in the last chapter. A lot of the other readers kind of mentioned this as well in the comments. You know, people were saying, okay, so it'll be a question of how Yuji reacts to Nanami dying. Certainly, at the end of the last chapter, it was just pure rage, right? And just kind of like directed at Mahito. But I love this, and this is very cool how Akutami Sensei presents this on page 12. You know, we see Nanami's words saying, "You've got it from here," and then Itadori, you know, kind of taking on that moment, saying Nanami wouldn't lose his cool, and certainly that's the case. And this is what I love. I got goosebumps when I was reading this part. You know, he's saying, "Prove to him, Yuji. I need to prove to Nanami." And then we see Nanami's words on the bottom right. "You are," because, you know, indicated in black. Nanami saying, "You are." Yuji saying, "I am." Boom. A Jujutsu sorcerer. Oh, and you're just like, this is one of those like, yeah, come on, get him. So such a cool moment, and we see kind of the aura coming out of his hands. Remember, he uses a divergent fist. I'd be curious to see what kind of an evolution of that might be later on down the road, but as of right now, he seems to kind of have a better grasp about it, and he looks focused here. But on page 13, we see Mahito kind of taking his stance as well, and he kind of goes on to explain you know, that increasing his size apparently does have a negative effect, that the bigger the size, the less kind of dense he is, quite literally, and kind of, it seems like the toughness kind of, as he grows bigger, isn't as strong either. So theoretically speaking, if he just kind of keeps his form, that's the toughest he is, and the bigger he gets, then the weaker he gets as well. Not to mention that it does increase his size and make for a bigger target for Yuji as well. So that's why he's saying, "I need to focus on concentrating my body's form to maintain toughness." But then on page 14, he kind of goes on to say, that's what Itadori must be thinking. Itadori's probably predicting my movements based on the flow of cursed energy. And then Mahito kind of goes on to say, okay, so I'm just going to hit him with maximum strength, this kind of the kind of maximum toughness, and I'm going to stab Itadori's heart, right? But then on page 15, this is one of those pages, right? Super hype. We got the narration going on. Mahito coming in and then says, "Mahito's fist pierces through air and Itadori disappears from his sight." Of course not, you know, he doesn't actually disappear, but this does kind of bring up this really cool thing on page 16. Now, this is obviously a big highlight of the chapter. It's in Japanese, it's called Hiza Nuki. And we translated it as knee release. So this kind of idea of martial art, kind of, it's a technique where it's used to kind of eliminate this idea that, you know, whenever people move, there's always these kind of indicators saying that they're about to move, and you're able to read opponents' kind of movements based on that and counterattack and things like that, right? A lot of boxers, for example, will read their opponent's body movements and see that they're coming in with a straight perhaps, and you know, that's their opportunity to counter. Obviously this applies to a lot of different martial arts, and this applies to a lot of different sports as well, not just martial arts. Like in American football, for example, you know, a running back is running with the ball, and then you see them kind of moving one way, and then that's how you can predict their movements, but that can also be used as a fake, right? And in soccer, for example, too, kind of same concept. But the idea being that this knee release, you're able to kind of get the body moving without indicating to the opponent that you're about to do that. You know, whether it be kind of flailing arms or kind of changing body angle and things like that. Apparently, it's the idea that you just kind of let your body kind of loose, and then gravity kind of takes control. There's some really cool videos. I'll have them linked that kind of show off this technique, but you can see right here the red one being the knee release, and then the green one being just a regular movement. the idea is that the red one, you can't tell that the body is kind of, you can't see this starting movement, right? But in the end, even though you have the advantage of not kind of indicating to the opponent that you're about to move, in the end, you still end up in the same place as the green one, which is a regular human's kind of movement, right? But then they kind of go on to explain that Itadori not only releases his knees, but his hips and shoulders too, lets gravity take over. And that's why they kind of go on to say, instead of falling down, this movement guides him to Mahito's feet, kind of flows almost, right? And then at the bottom of page 16 here, it says, from a lower position, he utilizes momentum to strike with Taido martial arts. So Taido martial arts is first time I've ever heard of it. I'm kind of ashamed that I've never heard of it, but a little bit of research kind of explains that it was created in 1960. Again, this is just kind of like a quick Wikipedia search, so feel free to do it yourself if you want. But kind of the basics is that it was created in 1965 by someone called Seiken Shukumine. And it's the word Taido derives from kind of the way of the body, right? Do, you hear it in like kendo, sado, kado. Do is always mean bushido. Do always means kind of the way of, right? And then so the tai in Taido is, although the kanji is kind of a rare usage of it, it's body, right? So the way of the body, kind of, which is very interesting because it kind of goes on to say that Taido has its roots in traditional Okinawan karate. So Okinawa is kind of the southern isles of Japan, right? Kind of tropical. And karate just in general does, its roots come from Okinawa. Whether the Okinawa connection has something to do with Itadori, because whether Itadori's kind of doing this on instinct or whether he's doing it because he's been taught this is kind of interesting. And if he's been taught it, then perhaps it will, not to say that he has to be from Okinawa or anything, but perhaps it gives us a little bit of a background and a little bit of a hint to what his background might be. His dad, perhaps, his parents, and the grandpa, as we saw at the beginning of the series, right? But anyways, Taido is really interesting because it's basically the founding. This person, Seiken Shukumine, he basically became convinced of the limitations of karate, traditional karate anyways. So he started kind of manipulating it in a way, adding techniques where it became a lot more flexible. And then, so Taido also introduced a lot of kind of different innovations, including spinning and twisting movements, very kind of gymnastic movements, a lot of speedy and effective footwork, and changing of the body angle. And, maybe for those of you that are familiar with kind of martial arts and Bruce Lee, for example, like Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee was smart because he kind of took different techniques and was very flexible. He didn't say this is the way it has to be done. It was a very practical, Jeet Kune Do is a very practical form of martial arts, a very adaptive form of martial arts. And it seems that Taido is very much that way as well. Although it has it very much has a lot of its basics from karate, whether it be stances and things like that, it's a lot more flexible, which I always appreciate because, although there are great things about like just traditional karate or traditional kendo, there always will be limitations. And so I like these kind of martial arts, these kind of ways of thinking that say, no, there needs to be kind of flexibility in order to adapt. So very, very cool, very cool. But then he goes on to use something called manji kick. So manji is manji in Japanese is kind of like the symbol of the swastika, right? Of course, in history, the most famous use of this symbol is, World War II and the Nazis and this and that. But traditionally speaking, it's supposed to be a very auspicious symbol in kind of religious terms, right? So it's unfortunate that it was, you know, you don't need a history lesson here, but for those of you that have studied the Nazis in World War II, you know what the deal is. So it's cool because I also found a video of one of the kind of foremost practitioners of Taido. Again, I'll leave this video in the description. It's really cool. You need to check it out. But he shows off the manji kick, and it's exactly what Yuji is doing here. It's the idea of kind of a counter attack of kind of getting low, using this knee release, getting low, and using that momentum to hit with this strike with this kick. And it's such a cool technique. And again, this kind of brings up the question whether Itadori kind of just did it based on instinct, or he actually knows Taido, which would be very interesting, and maybe something that they'll explore more, because if you watch this video, you'll see that Taido has a lot more to it, a lot of flipping and this and that. So perhaps that's why Yuji is very kind of effective in hand-to-hand combat, and he is kind of familiar with it, is that he's been taught in this Taido martial arts. That's why he's very kind of like flexible and jumping around and this and that. So perhaps this is a hint a little bit into Itadori's background. But anyways, he connects, and then we go on to the next page here, and then Yuji immediately gets up and then hits Mahito with another front kick straight to the abdomen, right? Which again, this is another concept of Taido as well, is that whenever you attacked, you always have to kind of get back into stance, get into a ready stance, even if you connect. But this isn't just with Taido. This is a big concept in a lot of different martial arts, that, after you strike, always get back. Like, in boxing too, after you punch, make sure you always keep the hands up, as they say, right? But yeah, then we move on to page 19, the last page. We see Mahito kind of getting, manipulating his arm into this kind of like whip looking thing. And, of course, Kaki is always not bad, but let's move on to the second round, right? But yeah, it was a really cool chapter. Obviously, we got to see Itadori kind of show off his moves a little bit here. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit. I learned a lot from this chapter about Taido, and I thought it was really interesting doing this kind of the research on the manji kick and things like that. Again, it kind of comes back to Mahito and what, the whole you are me, whether that actually means something a little bit greater or not. Also in terms of Itadori's character, the fact that he knows how to use this knee release almost suggests that he has been trained in it. But again, Itadori has oftentimes been referred to as just kind of he's just got a gift, right? So perhaps he is just doing it based on instinct as well. But the narration certainly seems to suggest that he's doing this willingly, that he actually has, he's a practitioner of Taido. Again, giving us perhaps a little hint into his background. But yeah, hey, that was chapter 121. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free, obviously, to let me know if you got some questions. If I can answer them, I will. If I don't know the answer, I'm sorry. But yeah, otherwise, thanks very much for spreading that positive juju. Hope you guys are doing okay out there, staying safe out there. But yeah, hey, with that, you know how we do. Mata yoroshiku. Cheers to you. See you next week. All right.